Top of the morning, my fellow peasants. Welcome back to part 2 of Huffing Copium with Pez. Let's huff some more copium. Continuing on from Joshua Rossfield, the fate of him, what happened, this idea, this headcanon, this hope that I've instilled within my bones for a Joshua DLC. One that will come in and rectify so much of what I personally, and it's just my brother's opinion, guys, found really unsatisfying about the ending of 16. A lot of dropped plot threads, a lot of unanswered mysteries. I think in my headcanon that I'm going to be explaining and sharing with you today, guys, this would add such a deeper dimension to the story, to Ultima as a villain, and I'm really hoping for it. And yeah, in the previous video that I did, spoke out why I do think it's possible Joshua's alive. Again, we know that Ultima with his power, he has some semblance of power over souls. We know that with the pre-existing technology like the obelisks and the Eret stones that Clive has access to, that the channel ether to various mother crystal points all around the world. That's how we teleport to different parts of the world. That, you know, when you combine that and the fact that Ultima was trying to create the raise spell, that's why I've landed on the conclusion that I do think it's highly possible. Clive had raise, he did it on Joshua, but he didn't resurrect Joshua physically. It just did something on a soul level, a spirit level. What we know is that Ultima could separate his spirit from his body, and he could also do it to Clive into interdimensional rifts and space. That's why we've seen Joshua and Clive both in various metaphysical kind of environments. And I just got to wondering how far they might have gone with that theme, and if there were moments in 16 and certain side quests where they were showing to us, pointing more or less to like spirits and the idea of being reborn. I mean, even in the moon gazing and my star theme, here's just like various sort of lines, which again, not all of this is literal. I feel a lot of people took it very literal with things like, you know, being by my side, never dying, for example, always being there in your heart. I think a lot of it is just supposed to be metaphorical and interpretive. You know, the spirit of someone never dying, like living on though they are dead and gone. The legacy and the memory and the love of that person lives on through others and things that they did in their life. I think, you know, that's the point of Gav looking at that baby and saying, the world's for you now. I think they showed it clearly to us with Clive continuing on Sid's name, becoming Sid the Outlaw. There was a theme of continuing someone's legacy. And I even think that's why it's possible, and a lot of people are thinking, yeah, Joshua Rossfield, the book of Final Fantasy. It's possible Clive wrote it, or Yote, or someone from the Undying, to once again have the spirit and the legacy of somebody live on. But that aside, I do think it's also possible there is another dimension to all of that kind of symbolism and thematic metaphorical language. Specifically like this line here, were we to be reborn, I would still find my way back to you. I think that's what the line was. It's here. That's the line I'm talking about. And when I look at lines like that, that's some reincarnation kind of stuff. I think Final Fantasy has used this sort of cyclical and rebirth and sort of spiritual theme again and again, reincarnation as a whole. And that is possible that those kids at the end, the black-haired and blonde-haired boy who have mother who has the same voice as Annabella, that they are pointing to us that not only does the legacy and spirit of someone live on, that they also enter again into new lives. And that's why that boy likes Saint and Sectary. That's why there's so much familiarity there. I personally, I'm not saying that that is the case. This is reincarnated Clive and Joshua. I'm saying it's possible that Square are pointing that kind of spiritual lens at us to make us think and go down these different tunnels. And that's why I've gone down the avenue I have. I know some people have taken it and gone down the avenue of it's all a fantastical story written by a boy called Joshua. None of it is real. And I did read a comment that unfortunately I have to agree with, guys, is when it comes to writing an ending of a story, if so many people are able to come away with the conclusion, like looking at all the evidence, and their conclusion is none of it happened, none of it was real, none of the characters were real, we were playing a fairy tale the entire time, then that just goes to show how pointless the ending is, how meaningless, how reductionist and kind of empty it is, where you can reduce it to nothing happened. I sort of agree with that. And that's the thing, if people are able to like take it down that it was all just a fantasy, then I don't think it's a far stretch to say, this is all reincarnate stuff. And we're supposed to be looking at the spirit aspect that has appeared in the game numerous times with a bit more of a scrutinizing eye. What Ultima did with his body and separating it from his spirit, those spirit spaces went into, and even something like Elwyn's quest, where we went to his grave as the boys. I'll just quickly play it.
I've been trying to live up to his ideals ever since.
Might watch over us as we follow in your footsteps.
Clive pausing, sensing it, turning around. Again, it may not be literal, the actual spirit body of Elwyn was standing there behind him, but it also might be literal because, again, also in that space that we were fighting Ultima, we also heard Elwyn's voice. Now, we also heard a lot of living characters as well, so it's possible that the souls of both living or dead are kind of connected to the interdimensional rift. And I pointed out in the last video why 7 has done this, in the live stream, why 15 did this, Bahamut, in the crystal space. That in these metaphysical crystal spaces where ether flows, or life stream flows, which is life, it's the very essence and energy of life itself, that it kind of transcends space and time and blurs the boundaries of life and death. When I put all that together and see a lot of themes and talk about living on through others, but also songs of being reborn. There was even a Rosarian verse. I'll quickly read this. Now this is very juicy. So this is one of the last compendiums in the Rosarian verses that you get just before you go into the final fight with Clive, the last point in the hideaway. And it says, "The hills run red with brave men's blood, and the talons flow in flood, then out to sea." So you does that? Freaking Clive washing up on a beach, talking about the sea, the mysteries being the archipelagos of the southern continent, which is where Barnabas came from, Leviathan the Lost may have originated from them. Everything with Drake's eye jutting out of the water. The fact that the big final mystery is all of this water-themed stuff in so many areas. So Zameckis Basin, the southern continent, and Leviathan. Anyway, the next line is, "But those same souls, whose souls are touched by flames of phoenix claw, are clutched and ne'er shall die." So the souls touched by Phoenix's claw never shall die. Joshua being the Phoenix, Clive becoming the Phoenix and then touching his brother, essentially the claw never shall die, souls, you feel me? And the last line, "So dry thine eyes, thy groom is gone, but in thy babe his light lives on, and so shall he." A lot of ways to interpret that, of course. It's very poetic, ambiguous language. A lot of people taking that as, and I've seen this a lot, Jill's pregnant, so Clive's going to have a son, and Clive living on vicariously through his son, like an ancestor sort of thing. Maybe. But it was crazy to see that as I'm going down this sort of rebirthing sort of theme and seeing it in a few places. "In thy babe his light lives on, and so shall he," essentially becoming that new life. But what specifically also adds to this sort of, when a life ends and a new one begins, and how that ties with souls, even following on with that Elwyn side quest, I'll just play you what Clive said directly after spotting or sensing his father.
Onward then.
Onward. To the end.
And to a new beginning.
So Clive says, "On to the end," and Joshua, "On to a new beginning." So when I tie that also with Clive narrating, like he did at the start, "And thus our journey begins, and thus did our journey end," both at the opening and close of the game, very significant. This is Clive's ending, but a new beginning for Joshua. And therefore it's going to be a Joshua Rossford DLC. And it's one way to interpret it. I mean, there's definitely something in there of, you know, the whole game that we just did being, you know, Clive's story and it having an opening and an end. You know, and Clive saying on to the end, as Square Enix show us, you know, his father, Elwyn, a spirit body, showing us a freaking spirit body. And I may be reaching, I may be connecting dots that don't exist, but I just got the feeling that, you know, showing that and all of this craziness and what potentially happened to Joshua, that, yeah, not only do all lives and all spirits live on in the world of 16, by the very nature that souls and spirits exist, and the idea behind souls and spirits is they're eternal, they never die. They always move on into a new life unless it's kind of following more Christian or Catholic kind of religion, in which they either go to heaven or hell. But that's kind of the thing with 16, is we've seen it lean more into kind of Eastern philosophy as kind of being the true philosophy behind it, and actually the Western religions, they were kind of the flawed one, the flunked ones. Again, the whole thing with Grigor was just a social manipulation tactic. It says it in the Sandbreak lore that they more or less know that Grigor isn't a thing. They made it up. And there's so much in the story of 16 and its lore and its compendiums that are fake outs, manipulations. Of course, even without the intentional ones, humans naturally Chinese whisper lore and information over millennia, and they distort it, and it becomes very different from its original. And we even freaking learned, and this is why I think there's a high possibility, even probability, that Joshua wakes up in the DLC, that there is a perfect opening for this, that not everything in 16 is rounded out, done and done. Because not only is there the mystery of Leviathan Lost still out there, just a hanging apple, just waiting to be plucked. Why did Square Enix do it? Why did they put Leviathan in there whatsoever? Was it just to fake us out with mystery, make it seem more intriguing, more titillating? Now, Leviathan could be out there. Where is Leviathan? What is Leviathan? I mean, they even had Joshua say it in the game. Did they really tee up everything with Leviathan Lost just for it to go nowhere? Like, they had no plan of it. Or is Yoshi P's plan? Because again, he said he wants to do, his priority is to do a Sid DLC. That's what he wants. He thinks there's a lot of cool backstory there. You know, with everything with Willowed, when Sid was Lord Commander going against Barnabas and then Benedicta. Even when Sid, you know, did a showdown with Dion down at Drake's Head, that there would be a lot of story there. And I agree, it'd be the easiest thing for them to do. They'd have all the voice actors. A lot of people love Sid's character, so it would definitely be the safest option. But would it add that much? Again, it wouldn't be a Dawn of the Future scale pivot, so I personally want more. I personally would be, I wouldn't say disappointed. I would be disappointed, but I'd just like to see the Joshua Leviathan Lost arc go down. Because, yeah, Joshua's character, I feel he kind of got slowed down by everything that sort of happened after the sort of 60-70% mark of the game. You know, after he'd sort of shunned Yote off, which, man, they did Yote run. They were such a power duo, those two, and I really thought we were going to get like more, and then, it was so unsatisfying to me when they did away with Yote, man. I mean, they didn't do away with it entirely. She just sort of hung around the hideaway looking sad all the time. Man. And then they had Joshua like kind of breaking off from Clive to go and look at the murals and the cosmology, mogony. What is the difference between cosmology and mogony? I'm figuring out at this point. I was really hoping Joshua was going to be our sort of lore junkie, our Indiana Jones going and looking at temples and deducing like some crazy stuff. All he did was deduce things that most of us had theorized way before the game came out. Like, oh, that big thing. Look at it. It's like, it's got Phoenix in it. It's different Phoenix merch. Yeah, we know. We already know, bro. Just really slow down all the things with Joshua. So there's nothing on his character, his characterization. It's just the cosmogony kind of being a bit weak and weakly presented and not having enough cool, interesting angles to it. That's exactly why Leviathan the Lost was exactly that. It was supposed to be a mystery, a new angle, a new dynamic, a nuance to the cosmogony. And that's, I feel strongly, guys, the problem with Ultima is there was no nuance to him. He was just literally two-dimensional the majority of the game. When you first saw him, it was really, really cool. You know, his presentation, very creepy, very scary. But then it just goes on and on and on, and you just find out he's a pre-Final Fantasy V boss. He's just basically a dick god. Like I saw somebody put a funny meme out, and it's true. He's basically just another god playing human Animal Crossing. Yeah, and I know that in the final fight, Ultima finally did start expressing some emotion. He started expressing fear, neuroticism, anger, hate. He started becoming very emotive. But it was just really, really jarring because there was no setup to that. There was no real explanation why that was happening. Now I've gone away in my head. Guys, this is why I don't think it is impossible that we can't have a DLC. Again, I don't think it's likely. I think from what Yoshi P in this article has said, they're leaning towards Sid. He did say in this article, though, that is just his opinion. That is absolutely not confirming it or confirming that's what they would do. This was just an old thing, him saying that's what he thinks would be a sweet idea. Doesn't entirely debunk the possibility of it going in a different direction after they get fans' feedback. That's been the point, guys. They were waiting to see what people's reception to the ending is, to see what they say, and I think it is very possible that just like with the 15, that's why Dawn of the Future happened. Because a lot of people were dissatisfied with 15, like with many of the dropped like plot elements and the things that were unsatisfying, not enough Aranea, they added Aranea. Not enough Luna Freya, they added Luna Freya. I mean, quite literally, Dawn of the Future was retconning all of fans' problems and woes and gripes with the game. It is not entirely inconceivable they do the same with 16. And I think the way to do that is have Joshua have his soul sent into a new beginning. Clive, when he touched him, he sent, just like ether can travel to the mother crystals, Joshua's soul went there. And the 3 crystals he could potentially go to, I mean, one is like Drake's horn, but we know that's depleted by the blight. That was the other sort of Willowed crystal. Drake's eye. Now let's talk about freaking Drake's eye. Now there's a little juicer mystery because yeah, we know that Drake's eye. It says it got destroyed or blighted after the Northern Territories fell. Rosaria attacked Northern Territories. I think it just simply said their crystal was lost, and I wondered, oh, like did it like sink into the ocean, get carried by oceanic currents to somewhere, or is it just simply this? Look at this thing, this big old crystal structure that people have seen and spotted, just jutting out the goddamn ocean. What the hell is that? And like Clive doesn't speak about it, no one speaks about it. Is this Drake's eye that's just been chilling out here? And the thing with both eye and horn is, while we could say that they're blighted or they're depleted, are they entirely blighted and depleted? Or even does being blighted and depleted equal completely dead? And what does that look like, being that we know that these crystals are Ultima? So when these blighted, did that Ultima that was that crystal die completely? Is that what happened? Because again, the crystals weren't destroyed like Ultima thanked Clive for doing, because it freed some of his brothers who, long after they had done their job of slurping ether for the final raise spell, they were still trapped. So even though these crystals are blighted, are they still in there? Are they just dead? And then outside of those 2 crystals, follow me guys, what about Zameckis crystal? So Zameckis is that big water basin. It's just we've heard there was another crystal once there long ago. That was when man fought God, which the real story of that is the children of Zameckis worshipped Ultima through the Malleus religion. They end up creating airships just like the Ultimas. They then launched an assault on Zameckis for the power of God. And the Lord tells us that Ultima punished humanity for that hubris. He was triggered by that attack and he yeeted most of humanity, most of the children of Zameckis. It says only a few survived, and a lot of them then wandered the world sort of all the way to the southern continents, the archipelagos. That's where Barnabas came back from. Now the juicy detail with the archipelagos, mostly a series of watery islands, is that's where the best medicines come from. So we've heard a few details. And I want you to keep this in mind. Medicine, healing, the waters. This is exactly why Kiel, this chick, is being theorized to be the Leviathan dominant medicine girl, because she speaks about her grandmother coming from the southern archipelagos. She has healing medicines, the poultices. She gives Dion water, and they make a point of saying it's fresh water, and her name means something watery. I'll stick it up here. Can't exactly remember, but we have all of that lore there, with the mystery being behind water and concealed behind water. And that's what the Zameckis crystal also is. It's hidden, or it's situated. I shouldn't say hidden. I think it is hidden by this big water basin. Now, when we read in the lore, it just says that water is pouring into there into perpetuity. That basically Ultima not only destroyed most of humanity in the Children of Zameckis, he also supposedly destroyed the crystal as a punishment. Now, I've got a question if that's real, guys. That seems a bit sus. Because why would he destroy a crystal that was still nowhere near done in doing its duty? AKA slurping up some ether juices and basically acting as like a Mako reactor. Well, of course, we know that the crystals, they are all Ultimas. So did he destroy it to free a part of himself? He wanted an extra piece, like an extra 16th of himself returned? Or is it possible he didn't destroy it at all? And the reason why that big crater with water falling in perpetuity, which kind of implies a pretty unnatural kind of processes going on, there's a crystal down there that after the Children of Zameckis kind of clocked on to what the crystal was and made a vie for its power, that ultimately realized he needed to be a bit more sneaky and conceal the crystal. And is that what he did when he realized that these humans, these beings that he created that were becoming very vexing on him, that were developing their own will, that were starting to go against the plan that he had for them, realized in that moment he needed to put an ace in the hole, a trump card. He needed to hide 1/16 of himself away just in case. This is what I think happened, guys. And we know it is not beyond Ultima to lie about what happened to the crystals, because in the lore we also find out the first worm was also this story, this fabrication that Ultima created around the naming of the crystal. Head, fang, breath, spine, tail, horn. These were names that Ultima gave to the crystals with the intention to misdirect humans on what their true nature was, so that they would create fairy tales around them, fantasies, stories, so that the truth of what they are and what they were doing was hidden from view. So, you couple in natural misinterpretation that humans do, you add on manipulation, and controlling the masses, like the Grigor thing, and you add on Ultima bullshit. How are we to believe that the Zameckis crystal could potentially just be hidden in a subterranean lair, and that we're going to go there with Fricka Joshua, and he's going to be in some sort of like Atlantis, El Dorado, Hollow Earth theory, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson still alive down there fighting T-Rexes and Tyrannosauruses? Let's go! That's my idea for the DLC. Right there, Yoshi P. If you take my idea, I don't mind. Cut me in on a few, like 2% of the royalties, and we're good. I'm obviously joking, but basically when there's like 3 crystals that could potentially have some active element or even be completely concealed, that's one area where a 16th, because that's the thing, even if 1/16 of Ultima exists, arguably the story isn't done. That is what Joshua on the post-game arc, or even Clive, if it is him who comes back, because some people have theorized it's going to be Clive coming back in the DLC and having to finish up something to do with Leviathan. I'll quickly read this idea out from the Nefarious. Posted out to me on Twitter. I like the idea. They've added some really cool ingredients. Yeah, I just do it through the lens of Joshua, but this person says that Clive on the beach, he's not in his own time. He was sent back to the Zameckis War era. That Clive will be trapped in that time, that we're going to get to see some of that cosmogony, origin, fall of man story. I think there'll be a lot to make there, and a lot of new assets and arguably VAs. I think that's what would make it really, really difficult to do like a whole different time era. But regardless, it's a freaking cool idea. And that Clive ends up being the reason, the fault for Leviathan not reviving. Either through a fight that Clive has with Leviathan that we as the player get to go on and absorbs and takes Leviathan's power, essentially taking Leviathan out of the loop. During the story, Clive has the Bearer Curse and is depowered because of this, like one-handed. The waterfall is the result of Odin's Gungnir Lance, being, I guess, from Clive with in a fight with another icon, Because yeah, we'd also go and fight other icons like previous dominants, either ancestors of Barnabas, Clive, or Sid, or other like Phoenixes, Ramas, Bahamuts that came before. Again, this is all more like a big ass like Final Fantasy 16 too. This is too much to make for a singular DLC. But basically, after the story wraps up, Clive will be turning to stone because he's been slowly petrifying in the airship that falls into the dim. So I like this. In whatever DLC we have, I do wonder, if you haven't seen it, this doorway here that you hear in a secret area, it's kind of near Eastpool. It's an airship doorway. And Clive basically, when he goes past it, says he'd like to know what's through there. What's through there? It's some sort of mystery. And again, is it like Leviathan Lost? It's just a mystery added for mystery's sake to titillate the player, but there's nothing to it? Or is it some sort of plan for a DLC? But yeah, after that, when Clive's turned to stone in the dim, he'll go there to rest. Having all icons, though, will have granted him a new power, Esuna, that will activate in his real time, 1 to 2 years after the battle with Ultima. Now, I'm just going to say, on the face value, I love the idea of like old spells like Raise in Esuna getting used in those like, big, juicy, elaborate ways in the story. I do think that's really freaking cool. It also kind of reminds me of, Palom and Porum in 4, they get petrified, and then right at the end of the game, like a special kind of Esuna, I think it was, gets discovered, and frees them of their petrification. It'd be exactly the same as, was it Blank? Was it Blank in Final Fantasy 9? Dude who gets petrified at the Forbidden Forest, and then it's much later that we find like a special kind of medicine, to free him of petrification. So there's like a magic aspect, like Esuna, this guy, he was Clive with the petrification. He goes there, he finds Jill and Ida raising 2 kids, one of them is Clive's son, and then presumably with that power, any other bearers that may still be petrified or getting stony, even after Metia has disappeared in the end of 16. That they could be healed. Now, I love that particular idea. And I think that is such a sweet concept, especially even if it is Joshua in my theory. Even if Joshua wakes up in the Zameckis basin, that's where Leviathan is, washes up on the southern continent where Barnabas came from, and the children of Zameckis, so we get to see more context of what happened there. And that he finds lost Leviathan, and because this was an area of healing, this is where the best medicines and healing waters and healing plants came from, that's where the hidden secret of an Esuna is, either spell or medicine, and that Joshua is going to find it so that he can raise freaking Clive. That'd be so cool. Not even just to raise Clive, even just to heal some of the blighted regions, help the planet, kickstart the process of healing, even if all the butt bearers that are in the process of dying to the curse, Joshua can heal those. Shit, man. That would be such a Dan Carino idea. Like, that would almost, that is almost like a 16-2. That's kind of, and it would be a bit like 13-2. It goes from lightning, it switches to Sarah. Sarah's off to try to find lightning. It would be such a cool setup. Probably again, more for 16-2 than a DLC. But do I actually think that's going to happen? No. I think we do have to listen to when Yoshi P said that from his perspective, the story is done. The story is complete. It's fully rounded, and that was their intention, to create a fully complete story. So I don't think it is likely, but I don't know. Do you think it's possible? Would you want a 16-2, guys? I've seen a lot of people say that. Why would you want that? It's exactly sequels and prequels that have ruined the franchise. I totally disagree. I think regardless of what they do with 16, DLC most likely, if that happens, it's going to be a while before that happens. We're going to definitely have the PC port come out first in 6 months, so it's probably like a year or 2 down the line, and yeah, that's going to be based on whether or not Square Enix green light it, especially after so many DLCs have kind of been financial burdens and flops and haven't really boosted the revenue and sales of the games as the intention of them was to do. I think those 16 will be different because they have spoken about 16 kind of dropping off in sales, now not meeting expectations. Square Enix and new CEO Kiryu, he's just done a massive flip-flop on the success of 16. I'm talking about slow adaptation of the PS5 being the reason for disappointing sales, even though the adoption ratio of 16 no to PS5 users, is the highest of all the latest Final Fantasies. It really just is the case that exclusivity obviously has hurt the sales. I mean, obviously. I'm in shock, surprise. It's really kind of annoyed me. I'll talk about this in another video. I really thought Square Enix had their expectations in check. Just to find out, no, they really didn't. But yeah, there we go, guys. The only thing I could round out with this idea would be more elaboration on Ultima and why I think it's possible that 1/16 of him still survives through Leviathan Lost, because there is a weave and it's subtle. And I don't know, I want your guys' impression on this, because I've been trying to work out, me and Brie, if it's one crystal, one icon, one Ultima. If that's the rule. Is that what you guys think it is? Is that how you see it? As in, so let's say like Drake's head. Is that Drake's head is what manifests Bahamut? And therefore there's an Ultima behind the crystal of Drake's head and the Bahamut? Because again, there's 16 surviving Ultimas. Now why 16? It could be because it's Final Fantasy 16, but I don't know, it seems a bit of a coincidence that there's 8 crystals and 8 summons, 8 icons. 8 and 8, 16. And, you know, we see with like Drake's breath, it's like, okay, so is that the Phoenix and Ifrit merge? That's just the fire? That's, you know, breath. Drake's fire. It's a fiery crystal, so that spawns the fire icon, which there should only be one, but somehow mysteriously there's 2. The mystery being that it was Ultima risen, Ifrit risen, Ultima's ideal vessel. So then you go, okay, so is the Willowed one, is that Garuda's? And like Drake's Fang, the depleted one, is that Odin's? Or is Odin one's on the southern continent? So is Rama Crystalline Dominion, is, you know, obviously Titan, is Drake's Fang, Zameckis. So Drake's Eye, so what is that one? The one that's jutting out the water, that's in Northern Territories, of what Jill was a princess. So is that the Ice Crystal? Is that the one that spawns Shiva? So then the question is, where's Leviathan's? Is that on the Southern Archipelagos? Is that the Zameckis one that was sunk? Because that's sunk, that's why Leviathan's lost. Leviathan is subterranean, hidden down there. Maybe, possibly. It's really hard to tell, because you'd think that, you know, when Drake's Eye, if it's saying it's destroyed or depleted, that don't mean that Shiva can no longer manifest. So I'd like your guys' opinion on that. What I've landed at so far is that each crystal is an Ultima, but the deal with the icons is far more nuanced, because Ultima, according to the lore, didn't necessarily create the icons directly. In fact, Ultima, he made the mother crystals, put his kin went inside the mother crystals, and then he gave humans elemental affinity powers. That's what he says. He gave, which I guess must be the bearers, he gave the guardians of the crystals elemental affinity in which to guard it. So when we see like bearers with like fire or wind or lightning or curative, it's because they were originally going to be the guardians of the crystals. And in the iconic lore, it says that humans having that power over a long period of time distilled and distilled and distilled, and then through that, the icon merged. Like they eventually just manifested into the world. And I'm like, okay, so what created the icons? Was it Ultima design? Like what created the image, the visage, the shape? Even arguably like the personality. Like look at Garuda. Garuda has a distinct personality. It's like trolling Clive, extremely vicious, versus say like Phoenix, you know, very regal, and Bahamut's distinct persona, or the wisdom of Rama. What made these? And what I landed on from that lore is I landed because it's what the 14 team did, that the collective consciousness of the collective, or the collective unconscious, when given structure and form by culture and religion and shared beliefs and shared ideology, is able to create these demigod-like beings. I mean, that's what happens in 14. The beast tribes more or less go and create like a big beastie demigod that represents their people. And like you look at Sambrek, having dragoons, having a religion that has a dragon in it. They also tamed dragons. So they basically became worshippers of dragons. And so is that cultural influence, like distilled with the power of both the Mother Crystal and the Bearers combined, that created Bahamut? Very curious. That's a very curious interplay of human will playing on not just with the crystals, which we also did see, did we not, with like Dion? We saw very nuanced interplay. Ultima, through Olivier, hijacked Dion. And then what we saw Bahamut try to do was destroy the crystal, so we can assume free another Ultima. And then we also saw Dion then create that big crystal flower. That shows a human having power over the Mother Crystal itself as well. So we saw both Ultima and humans' will kind of converge in that whole play. And what that made me think, basically, guys, is that why Ultima suddenly started expressing emotion at the end, when he'd remerged with other Ultimas, that were supposedly from the crystals or from the icons. But that's not only why he then started using the iconic powers, Titan's Fist and Odin's Sword, all of the iconic abilities, but that's also why he started feeling human emotions. Did he taint and poison himself? Did he infect himself, take on humans' will because he had gifted this power to humanity, a part of himself, a part of his essence? Then humans' will over centuries had used that magic, worked with that magic, worshipped, created societies around that magic, and then when Ultima took that magic back, it came back Ultima with the will of humanity, and that's why he started feeling feels. And basically, I've got around this video because I'm really, really freaking waffling, guys. Oh, it's a juicy tale. It's a juicy thing to consider. Very succulent to think then that not only were Ultimas potentially crystals, but maybe they'd also found a way, because you've got to think it from an Ultima's perspective, and the way Ultimalius phrased it to us is that they were trapped, they were prisoners in the crystal, stuck there for millennia, even after their duty of slurp dirt and ether was done. So were the icons like a way for those trapped Ultimas to have some kind of influence, to exert some sort of power and dominance into the world? That's why certain dominance rose to nation leadership positions, and Ultima was able to play a role in the world, in mythos, in the big mythos project, through the icons. And therefore, I get the sense that there being 16 Ultimas and 8 crystals and 8 icons, that also the icons are in a roundabout way also an extension of Ultima, and certainly, most definitely, Ultima's power, and therefore Leviathan being lost, or even the Zameckis crystal being hidden, equals 1/16 of Ultima still being out there. And that's what Joshua would have to round out, would have to finish, would have to conclude. And you know what I think would be really freaking sweet, guys, is if that 1/16 of Ultima was cast off or separate or hidden for a distinct reason. Big want, so that adds an extra dimension to Ultima, because he doesn't have enough dimension. Like, Final Fantasy has had these play of gods so many times, but always what makes it rich and makes the perspective, like you get a different angle, is when there's some sort of different ideology within that deity. So for example, the Acuria in 12, Vanar was different from the other Acuria. Vanar wanted to help Vayne Solidor, had a different slant, a different angle. This is exactly the same kind of Vanar that we saw in 14, not too much for spoilers, but a big council, and 1/13 of that council being separated off to go through the world and discover things, learn things. This is exactly what made the Fal'Cie rich. Pulseless Sea versus Cocoonless Sea, or Lindsay versus Aracia. It's what makes them richer, and Ultima did not have that richness, and lost Leviathan being 1/16 of Ultima that maybe thinks different, thought different, had a different purpose, a different reason, a different logic. Maybe that is why Ultima's mind was fractured, the interdimensional rift that we went into. It says that that was the inside of Ultima's fractured mind. But could they not play into the story that Leviathan lost was separated off, that it had, hell, maybe even developed some kind of intention for humanity? I know I wouldn't go as far as say it needs to be like compassion or care, but what if it saw humanity in a different way and saw a different purpose or potential with them? And that's why it wanted to maybe do some sort of curing aspect, and that's why it became Leviathan, which was healing, the healing archipelagos, the healing medicines that came from there. Tie that with Ession, tie that with healing the curse, bringing back Clive Rossfield, and shit, maybe that Ultima could even be the one who had the memories of Ultima's original kin and race, of which we learned nothing. Nothing! We didn't see any kind of backstory. Like, it's confusing whether they're a collective, whether an individual, what kind of race. There was no setup, no motive. So far removed from the likes of Emet-Selch and Elidibus, La Habrea. Like, they really, really missed a trick with that. And yeah, what if his mind is fractured? Because the one that had the memories, like the kind of organic or truthful, authentic backstory, was cast off. And we get to go in and see that, experience that, man, this would do so much redemption to the story, in my personal opinion. I have waffled for far too long on this part 2 of the video, but those are my thoughts, those are my feelings. Hopefully this video had a bit more juice to it in sort of understanding and framing the lore of the story outside of just my copium head cannons. This is all a lot for one wee peasant to just riff off the top of his noodle, but you really have an opportunity to salvage so many of the plot elements, in my opinion, with this kind of direction and kind of DLC. But that's just what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. God damn, I'm hungry. It took me so long to riff.